nowadays should learn how to do is see for yourself and listen for yourself and think for yourself, and then you can come to an intelligent decision for yourself. But if you form the habit of going by what you hear others say about someone, or going by what others think about someone, instead of going and searching that thing out for yourself and seeing for yourself, you will be walking west when you think you're going east. You'll be walking east when you think you're going west. So this generation, especially of our people, have a burden upon themselves more so than at any other time in history. The most important thing we can learn how to do today is think for ourselves. It's good to keep wide open ears and listen to what everybody else has to say. But when you come to make a decision, you have to weigh all of what you've heard of its own and place it where it belongs. And then come to a decision for yourself, and you'll never regret it. But if you form the habit of taking what someone else says about a thing without checking it out for yourself, you'll find that other people will have you hating your own friends and loving their enemies.
Good evening. This is Tariq Lang with another edition of Cultivating the Culture, December the 6th, 2020. As we always do at the beginning of our show, we play the speech from Malcolm X that was done in January 1965 for a group of youth that had come up from Macomb, Mississippi. And Malcolm emphasized to the group that they had to be able to think for themselves, because this was a new age coming in, and this is the new age of TV and other things and other people trying to control their minds. And he told them that was the most important thing. And us that cultivating the culture know that today it's still very important, and it is the most important thing for our youth, for our adults, for our older generation to learn to think for themselves. Today we're going to be continuing with going over Ice Cube's contract with Black America, and the subjects that we're going to cover is Constitutional Amendment number 4, and also police reform. And I have the honor of having esteemed guest. His name is Mr. Muhammad Bashir. He's a retired a criminal attorney, but also a constitutional expert, and he also has written several books. I'll let Mr. Bashir speak on those books and what he's done, and then we can start to go over this contract.
First of all, assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me on.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum to your audience, and peace and blessings to all of you those who don't understand the greeting. That's really just a greeting that says peace and blessings be upon you. My name is Muhammad Bashir. Tariq does me more justice than I deserve all the time. I'm an author. I'm a retired criminal and constitutional lawyer. I have 3 books out right now that Raw Law and Urban Guide to Criminal Justice, April 4th, Lessons on Living and Dying, it's a tribute to Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Adam Clayton Powell, and some of the leadership that I knew as I was growing up. And last but not least, just recently released, the book is called America in Blackface, Essays and Criticisms on Black Leadership, whatever that is. And so I look forward to the discussion here tonight. I again appreciate Tariq for having me. I hope I can do his confidence in me some justice.
Oh, well, most definitely. So the first, what we wanted to do is actually go over Constitutional Amendment, codify an expansion of the 13th Amendment. But one of the things I also want to let people know is that Mr. Bashir actually had a show, what is your show, Howard?
Absolutely. It's on Heritage Sports Radio Network. It's hsrn.com, and it's called the Raw Law Project. It discusses legal issues, the law, case studies in the Constitution and in America, with a perspective from strictly a black community perspective, in the hopes that people will be able to see the uniqueness of the black experience and being able to incorporate it in their daily lives. learning history, learning law, and being able to implement it into the culture so that the culture can be more representative of the people who are most impacted by the culture.
And that's on Thursdays at...
Thursday night at 8 o'clock from 8 to 10 on HSRN at hsrn.com.
Okay, and I'd spoken with him when the Ice Cube controversy came up, and I had really not gotten into it much. I just saw some of the propaganda that they actually sent saying that, he called Biden Hitler or something of the sort, and I thought that was strange. And then Mr. Bashir said he was going to do a show about it, so it caused me to really go further and to find out, what did Ice Cube say? What learn about this contract? One of the things is in order to be able to think for yourself, you have to do some work. You have to be able to investigate. You have to be able to, before you go and tell and talk about somebody else, you have to investigate to find out what is the truth and do your due diligence. And I did that, and that's when I realized how great of a plan this was. So I'd like to thank you on that, and that's why I definitely have you here. So can you explain to me this 13th Amendment by the courts, what the recommendation that they're talking about?
Okay, here's what Ice Cube's plan says. Let me put in a disclaimer. I think the plan is long overdue, especially as a form of a writing. Mm-hmm. I didn't really get into the politics of Ice Cube seeing Trump or Ice Cube seeing the Democrats.
Neither did I.
Because the question was whether or not he put out a plan that could be workable or at least needs to be discussed.
Right.
And so that's what my agenda was in dealing with it. And there's some things in it that I think are brilliant and necessary, and other things that, can fall by the wayside. But the idea is that if we're going to be a community that participates, then we need to put our ideas on the table.
And see, for me, knowing you to be as active as you've been, basically all of your life, and taking that opinion, and then, like I said, once I read it, seeing this, I have the same thing. People that are conscious, that have been active, that have been trying to make changes, when they see this, they know that they need to do something. And a lot of times, I'll have a conversation with someone, and as soon as I mention it, they go into the scripted conversation that they've been programmed to. And I ask them, did you ever read the contract?
Right.
And 99.999% of the time, they say no.
Right.
I said, okay, that's why you're saying what you're saying.
Yeah,
please read and get back with me.
All
so
right.
go on.
It's number 4, constitutional amendment codifying expansion of the 13th Amendment by the court. And it reads, amendment will abolish slavery in any form, including as punishment for a crime, as allowed by the 13th Amendment for persons, for prison inmates. Further, it will declare, and forgive me, I just had cataract surgery, so everything is blurred for me right now. So
Okay.
I'm trying to really...
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, no problem. All right. So basically it says amendments will abolish slavery in any form, including as a punishment for the crime, as allowed by the 13th Amendment for prison inmates. Further, it will declare unconstitutional any government-run system, including justice, policing, education, health, and welfare, etc., that does not provide services on equal basis to all citizens and communities. If provided public services fail to meet minimum standards, they will be considered on their face unconstitutional unless proven special circumstances. Reverses the burden of proof to those in non-compliance instead of civil rights lawyers having to prove systems as racist, while courts have expanded their interpretation of the 13th Amendment to provide some of these rights. This amendment will eliminate any uncertainty. What do you have to say about that?
Now, what you just read, and if you read it and read it and read it, you'll understand how really powerful this is. This is powerful. Everything that he wrote in here, or whoever wrote in here, this has power.
Okay.
And this is stuff that can be and should be the things that especially the black community is working on. Let's begin with the 13th Amendment.
Okay.
13th Amendment is one of the Reconstruction Amendments.
Right.
After the Civil War, they're trying to find a way to eliminate Dred Scott decision, which said that a black man has no right that a white man is bound to respect. So the way you eliminate the Supreme Court is you pass legislation, you pass laws, you amend the Constitution. Those are the ways that, because the Supreme Court's job is only to interpret the Constitution. All right, so they interpreted the Constitution to say, prior to the 13th Amendment, that a black man has no right that a white man is bound to respect.
And one more thing, they reminded me to let you let the audience see.
All right.
That's I'll
So
pay
now,
attention.
The 13th Amendment, basically says that slavery is abolished in these United States and the territories and controlled by the United States, except upon the commission of a crime. Now, one of the real intriguing things about that is that ever since that amendment was passed, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, the nature of white supremacy has always tried to find ways to implement that exception to the 13th Amendment through prison labor, through chain gangs, through contract leasing, through mass incarceration. All of them allow some level of what was commonly known as slavery. Now, slavery was involuntary servitude, forced involuntary servitude. What you now have in mass incarceration is kind of similar to forced involuntary servitude. And so to eliminate that aspect of the 13th Amendment moves you to what he argues in that other services would be declared unconstitutional if you didn't have this. So if you eliminate that part that says slavery and involuntary servitude is eliminated except when you commit a crime, you would not be able to use criminality as a way of returning people back to chain gangs, slavery, etc., paying them $1 on something that would normally you have to pay $25 on.
Right.
Then he goes into something that is even more profound. He begins to declare that if the Constitution stands for the equal rights of all people, meaning the 14th Amendment says that every person who is a citizen of the United States is entitled to all the due process rights, all the privileges and immunities that come with every other community has as it relates to the Constitution. If you're not employing black people the same way, if you're not educating black people on the same level, if you're not offering the services to black people in the same way, it would be a violation of the Constitution. He's asking that the Constitution be amended to indicate wherever you can demonstrate, or that the legislature indicate, or wherever you can demonstrate that people are being disparately treated, arrested, stopped and frisked, not given the same health care, that would be a violation of the Constitution. And it would have to be declared as a violation of the Constitution, and therefore, whatever it is, whether it was funding taken away from it, whether it was shutting the business down or whatever, that would be the penalty for something along that line. If you hearken back to Adam Clayton Powell's monumental bill where he indicates that even till this day, I think it was passed in 1959, but even till this day, if you do something that is discriminatory and you're receiving federal funding and you can demonstrate that it was discriminatory, your federal funding can be removed. Adam Clayton Powell passed that. This is an offshoot and an even more expansive idea as it relates to that. And that's why I say it's powerful, because it doesn't just lead to just the elimination of the amendment, which is just, for lack of a better way to put it, it's just dressing.
Right.
You just eliminate the part that says slavery is abolished.
And then they come up with something else.
And they come up with mass
Something
incarceration
else.
or something along that line. But it says if you can demonstrate that the people are not treating the people equally under the law, that eliminates the need for civil lawyers to go on individual cases. You could go into the court on a consent decree. Remember during the Obama administration they had the consent decrees where the feds investigated and found at least 22 cities that were violating the constitutional rights of the people, and they agreed to reform their police departments as opposed to accepting penalties or firing police officers or even having officers charged criminally. This would say, yes, we could do that. We could come and investigate, and if we did it, we found it wrong, the people could be charged criminally, and the police force can be shut down. Even something as important as a police force, to be able to shut down a police force because of its violation of the rights of the people is even broader than defunding the police. And I think that's a powerful argument to have, because you know how arguments work. You start here on one end, you start here on another end, and eventually people work to where they can find a meeting of the mind somewhere.
Right.
But if you don't start anywhere, or you always start where somebody else starts, you're always working on in their lane, in their game.
Mm-hmm.
This puts the game in the hands of the people.
Right.
Saying that we will not tolerate being second-class citizens on any level, and we expect that if you're running for office in Democrat, we want you to support this. If you're running for office in the Republicans, we want you to support this. That this is what the mandate is, and this is what we're asking for a discussion as it relates to that. That's why I think it's powerful.
Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to know, as far as for us as the average citizen, or how can we help to be able to make that happen, as opposed to just having a document, sit down with somebody, say that you should do this, and then not know who really has the power. A lot of times, we'll give something to the president. Well, and the president really doesn't have the power to do every aspect that is needed. You may have somebody that's on your local level that may be able to do something. You may have a governor, a mayor, or whatever. So when we have these type of amendments or these suggestions, what are the different avenues that we can go at it?
It's interesting that you should say that, especially in this contentious political season, that most of the reforms that he requests in this particular document are targeted toward, can we have a discussion about this? But if you just take it past discussion and say, let's assume everybody agreed to it, these are potentially reforms, with the exception of the amendment of the Constitution, are potential reforms you can do on every level. And I would suggest, it's something I say all the time to people, if you have a right, if you believe you have a right, and you don't exercise it, then you really don't have it. You don't have it until you use it. That's just simply how it works. That's the way a democratic republic is supposed to work. If I have freedom of speech, I'm supposed to be able to speak. And you don't know it until you test it and you speak, and then somebody tries to shut it down, right, or someone allows it.
Right.
All right? So that's the same thing with voting. If you have the right to vote, you don't know until you go to the polls and somebody denies you whether or not you have it or not.
Right.
Well, that's the same thing that this is saying, that you don't know you have these rights until you put it to the test. So you could literally put to the test that we're going to organize in our community, and we're going to say that if they're stopping black kids disproportionately, we are going to come to the council and say that we want this declaration that disproportionate stopping of black kids is unconstitutional, and therefore anyone across the board on the city level who does it, any group who does it, any organization who does it, is in violation of the Constitution, and we want you as a city council, as a mayor, as moving up the ladder, as a governor, as a president, as a congressman, to shut it down. That's what we want you to do. We want the government to step in and do what organizations do on the street corner.
Right.
We'll go in and, the Korean grocer is discriminating against black kids. That kind of thing. So we'll go in and shut it down. They're beating up, smacking black women. We go in and we shut it down. And this is kind of like a grassroots argument being put to the highest level, saying, if we can do this our own selves, but we want you all to discuss it as well.
And that's what we were talking about when we were saying about accountability, because every federal job, every federal position, every elected position actually has a job description, roles, and responsibilities. And a lot of times, they'll tell you they can't do anything, or they actually say they can do something. But if you would look at their job description, you would see that, no, you actually can, and because you didn't respond to that person under you, then you're in violation.
Right.
And so, and the same thing where somebody say, I can do all these things, like, well, how are you going to do it? Well, when your authority is only to do oversight. So, we've encouraged people to really start studying the different positions, whether the mayor, what's his rights, putting that out there, the city councilman, councilman at large, your ANC, these different people, and get people getting involved. There's even, like we used to always talk about, PTA meetings.
There you go.
How many parents come out? They complain about the school and what's going on, but how many do you actually see from ours coming out to the PTA meetings? And this is one of the things when we talk about changing the culture. Changing the culture. We pulled up the definition so people can understand. When we said cultivating the culture, I used to think we're just doing for rap.
Right.
The rap industry and stuff. Yeah, the culture. No, this is a term that they use, and they create it as though that culture is the culture. But the reality is this culture that the hip hop came from, I'm from the Bronx, and, I was born in '64. I lived over by River Park Towers, right down the street from Cedar Park. So I used to walk down there when they used to have the jams. But at that time, you're talking about 10 years after Malcolm was killed. You see, 10, 11. So the Malcolm effect was still there in Harlem and in New York.
Right.
You know, the Garvey effect was still, even though it was 40 years, 50 years, all of these people. So we had a culture of conscious people. And we were, when the music first came out, it was us being able to express ourselves and be who we are. But our culture wasn't controlled by entertainers. Because what happens is I have to do a job. And if I'm employed by an individual that is not part of my culture, then I have to entertain you, but according to the rules and regulations set by them. And one of the things is in New York, we have certain codes, things we don't do. And there's so many violations. So many violations that I see. You know, even the way the people talk to you, even the N-word, how they use publicly and stuff. There's so many violations. You know, but we'll get on that. But one of the things is when it's I'll just go real well. Actually, they said that it's time for us to take some phone calls.
Okay.
We have some people that are calling in. There's some calls. Okay, we have a new call. Ring it off and new calls.
While you do that, let me.
Oh, matter of fact, please call in. Okay, 301-429-9247. That's 301-429-9247. Please call if you have any questions. Go ahead.
You know, last time I was here, I couldn't see that sign because of the cataracts, but I can read it clearly right now. I can read at distances, but
That's
I can't read
good.
up close, man.
Oh,
Well,
okay,
please.
praise God, alhamdulillah.
But let me say something about the PTA. Being a member of the PTA, it's interesting that, you know, we don't get a lot of people who come out to the PTA, but we will get them to come out when something extraordinary happens. So when you go back to this, that's what these kinds of grassroots manifestos do. They give people who may not necessarily believe that they can impact a way to say, I can understand this. I can understand that my kid is being discriminated against. I can understand that my kid is not doing well in school, and I understand that there are people out there willing to lead on my level. Sometimes people don't participate in the leadership because they believe the leadership doesn't really care, or that it's at a level that is above what it is that they're trying to do, because nobody really deals with like family things, street corner things, you know, the kind of stuff that goes on a daily.
Right.
And so the participation there may not reflect it, but it doesn't mean that the people aren't genuinely involved and won't genuinely respond when they know that the leadership is trying to deal from a level of them.
And but most of the people have to believe, and that's one of the things that I'll hear people all the time say, they're not going to let us. They won't let us. They're not going to. Who are they?
Right.
What are they going to do?
Right.
They don't stop me from doing anything.
That's right.
You know, by you putting out, you are actually they. You are the they.
That's right.
That's stopping me, because you're saying that and you're telling others, and so instead of trying to open up the door, they don't open up the door because you really believe that you can. But like you said, once the people understand that, yes, you have the keys. You have the keys to open up the door, but you have to do a little work. You have to be able to, and you say, is my child education worth it? Is changing this culture of destruction worth it? Yes.
Yeah,
it's worth
absolutely.
us putting that television down, stop being entertained by these shows, and start doing some work. Taking out some time. Oh, we have a caller on line 1. Hello?
Hi. I just wanted to ask a question, like, what can we do? You guys were talking about the 13th Amendment, and I wanted to know, what can we do to kind of change that? Would that be part of like a police reform, or is it more legislative? You know, the 13th Amendment to abolish that. The slavery.
The thing is because it's funny. Well, you mentioned police reform because actually with the show we had 2 subjects. Number 4 was Constitution and other police reform. But Mr. Bashir, being that constitutional expert, actually told me before the show that we might have to just focus on number 4. No. And as I see, but there's a combined effort.
It's a good transition. It's a good transition. The idea of changing the Constitution is obviously a legislative act. All right?
Okay.
It's obviously a legislative act. You just can't change the Constitution from a street corner. But what you can do from the street corner is change the people's minds. And then the people can begin to create that groundswell that leads to the change of the Constitution. The women's rights movement led to the change in the 19th Amendment. All right, so that was a groundswell. They weren't allowed to vote. And in fact, with the 14th Amendment, only black males and white males were allowed to vote.
And that was surprising. I remember when I found that out. I'm like, wow, black men got a chance to vote.
That's right. But it was the groundswell of black men being necessary in order to make sure that the South didn't revitalize itself so quickly. So they needed that vote. They needed to give black men something, a way to participate. So they gave them the vote as a way of saying you're full citizens in order to get rid of Dred Scott. Women began to organize on that. Ain't I a Woman Too? Sojourner Truth, I believe it was, right? Harriet Tubman, one of them. Ain't I a Woman Too? I think it was Sojourner Truth. And they began to organize. Black women, white women began to organize, and eventually in early 1900s, 1915, somewhere in that range, they won the Constitutional Amendment. So they get the Constitutional Amendment, and that's by the groundswell that's created. But it was a groundswell that was created with the grassroots manifesto that was created, just like this is a grassroots manifesto.
Right.
That's what leads to your prison reform. That's why this connects with, when you say prison, you can't talk about the 13th Amendment and not talk about police reform, because they are basically in control as to whether or not you're treated as a criminal.
They are the recruiters for the prisons.
There you go.
You know, the thing is their attitude, their actions, their corruption is the thing that, you know, has increased it. They all work together. I mean, to be able to increase these amount of people that's inside the prisons. And one of the other things that he also mentioned in here was talking about the entertainment industry. And as we mentioned, they're like a second wing of the lobbyist group to be able to make sure that people are filling up the prisons because of their recruiting people with the nonsense and the things that they're doing, telling people that are sending. It's like a whole system. But one of the things is our show's actually winding down. I wanted to go over two things. And I'm definitely, I would like to invite you back to be able to go over with the police reform. But, you know, when they ask about our culture, I'm just going to give you two definitions of cultivate and the culture. To cultivate something, is to prepare and to work on in order to, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to prepare our people and trying to work on, to use as, to use or cultivate on, to promote or improve the growth. And that's what we're trying to do: promote and improve the growth of our people, to produce by culture. And we're trying to change the culture, so to create a culture of love and education, a culture of respect, a culture of obedience to the Creator. Of course, that's the number one. To promote growth or development. This is what this show is about. To devote oneself to an art, and the art is our culture, but a culture of righteousness, a culture of development, and to seek and promote foster. The other word is culture. Definition is an umbrella term which encompasses the social behavior and norms found in human societies, as well as the knowledge, beliefs, arts, laws, customs, capabilities, and habits of the individuals in these groups. Humans acquire culture through the learning processes of enculturation and socialization, which is shown by the diversity of cultures across the society. A cultural norm codifies acceptable conduct in society. It serves as a guideline for behavior, dress, language, demeanor, in a situation which serves as a template for the expectations in a social group. So this is important. This is what we want to try to develop. We want to be able to, and by focusing on our culture, we can cultivate a better society, and we can make this change. So I appreciate you taking the time out to go over this. I definitely would, if you have the possibility to be able to come back, so we can go over police reform, and because there's definitely some things I know that you know, going through the experience as a criminal attorney for so many years in that New Jersey, New York area, or Newark, you know, area, you got a lot that you can contribute to. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much, you know, for tuning into our show. I hope it has been a benefit to you. For learning, but I hope it's a benefit to you in your future. Hope it's a benefit to your children, and I hope it's a benefit to this generation, the next generation, and changing this culture to be a positive culture. Let's cultivate the culture. Peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum.